This video is going to begin with the ending. What I mean by this is that the ending is the end of my secondary school life and the end of my GCSE course. This video is essentially going to tell you about, what you expect in certain subjects, as well as what you can do to prepare for them, and not only for specific subjects but GCSEs as a whole. The subjects that I undertook for my GCSE course were maths, English language, English literature, physics, chemistry, biology, design technology, computer science, history, and Spanish. Also, in our school, we had to do philosophy and ethics, which is a fancy way of saying religious studies. So let's dive in, shall we? Let's start off with maths. Which for me was one of the easiest subjects, relatively easy, mainly because you don't necessarily have certain textbooks to revise from, unlike Englishes or history. However, one thing that I think is really helpful for everyone is to view maths more like a skill than a subject. So, like a skill, the more you practice that skill, the better you become at it. And with maths, the more you practice maths questions, the better you're at maths. What I did was I mainly went through practice questions as much as possible. The most common sites I used throughout my GCSE course for maths were Maths Genie, Dr. Frost Maths, and Corbett Maths. Well, with maths, you don't necessarily need a book because you have so much stuff on the internet, like the practice exam questions on the internet or tutorials on certain parts in maths. However, one thing that I got as a hand-me-down, which also helped me a bit, was this book here, which is just any GCSE book. If you think that, books are better for you at learning than virtual copies, then you should go ahead with getting books. But the main thing you need to know is that with books, you really want to get practice workbooks, ones which will give you questions in the GCSE format. Because, if you look at a lot of questions that you get on a day-to-day basis and you look at the GCSE questions, you see that they are different formats. And additional to different formats, they have different ways of you getting marks. Sometimes you would require more working out than usual in GCSE format than with other formats. So I would strongly advise you actually doing a ton of practice questions, not only so you can understand the format of GCSE questions, but by also looking at the mark scheme from those practice questions, practice GCSE questions, you can see what the examiners are looking for you to get the marks. Personally, I'd expect myself to get a grade 9 or A star in maths, mainly because based on what I did in my exams, I feel like I did really well. Obviously not the best. I think every single piece of work that I've put in maths shows clearly that I deserve a grade 9. Now on to the next subject. So, sciences. For me, I did triple science, which is physics, biology, and chemistry. And for me, I'm predicting 9s, which is A stars for all the sciences. What I did for these subjects was, I would recommend you first to buy these CGP books, right? So purple for physics, green for bio, and orange or brown for chemistry. And these books are really, really helpful. I'm not going to lie, these are super concise. The knowledge that you need for GCSE are literally written in one page, and they're so simple to understand. It's actually mind-boggling. However, sometimes you do get the case of, it doesn't cover all the things that you need to know for your specification, which is why you might as well get these books as well. They're chunkier, but they do the job. Or the AQA books that they have. CGP also makes longer ones, this is for Edexcel. I did AQA. This is obviously my sister's hand-me-downs. One tip I'll say to GCSE students is to go to their exam board website and actually look at the specification, because the specification tells you what's going to be in your exam. And if you think that you're overstudying or overlearning some part, you can use that specification to learn what exactly you need to learn. You can use CGP flashcards for active recall, and well, these cards, they cover essentially everything that's on the specification into these simple sized questions. But these cards cover all the things that you need to know in your specification, and they're really good for active recall. So that means that once you understood a subject, right, or you think you understood a subject, you put your learning material aside, pop one of these cards out, find what topic you think you mastered, and just recall from there. Obviously, do it continuously to better infuse the knowledge within your brain, and you'll obviously get job done. One thing I'll suggest for all subjects in GCSE is to actually go over GCSE papers, and so you can understand the GCSE format, the mark scheme, what they're looking for, the key points, obviously, and also how you can time your test. So usually you get an hour 30 minutes or hour 45 minutes for one paper. However, you may not know how to time yourself. So obviously getting used to those GCSE papers would enable you to actually do them in a set time and understanding the format of them. On to the next. Well, computing for me was also one subject that I wouldn't say I struggled on a lot of. And the reason for that is because if you look at the content of it, it looks like there's a whole lot of stuff to know. However, trust me, most of it actually is quite simple. In terms of content, for me, this was the least. So my school recommended us to buy this book because we were doing the OCR guide. We were doing the OCR exam board. So obviously we got the OCR guide. And within it, well, it visualizes some parts. Obviously, it gives you very good detail into certain things, right? As well as telling you how you could code for it. So not only is this helpful for paper 1, but paper 2 as well. Because some of the papers, right, in paper 2, they ask you to actually link back some of the knowledge from paper 1 to help you answer paper 2 questions. And that makes this even more useful. I would say that for me, I think I'll get a grade 9 for computing. But if it fails, I think I'll get a grade 8, which is an A star or A star star on this. But this book is really helpful for anyone who's doing the OCR. I would say though, the OCR specification, I would not recommend using that for revision, because well, really it doesn't tell you anything that you need to know. It will just say the word, but that's it. And I don't think that's really helpful. I mean, it's helpful in just telling you what you need to know, but at the end of the day, this covers exactly everything that you need to know. I think this is the only book that left no stones unturned, and for that reason, I would recommend you getting these types of books. These slightly thicker ones. I know friends who got the CGP guide ones. However, those ones, well, they are very easy to grasp the concept of, obviously, because they concise it so much down. It's so simple. However, they leave a lot of stones unturned. Or you can just go to BBC Bite Size. However, I would recommend getting the books over Bite Size, mainly because these books actually cover the more specific content that you see in exam questions than the Bite Size ones do. On to the next. With English language, I think similar to maths, it's a skill. So obviously, improving yourself by just talking more, reading more, or doing more exam questions would very much help with this. I would, trust me, this I think for every exam board will really help. Before exams, before English language exams, I would just read the first few pages, you know, the key points that you see in language, tone, form, structure. In the first few pages, it covers this. And well, for me, this helps me to understand everything. This not only helps with English language itself, but English literature as well. Because it tells you, okay, how would authors convey information or ideas, or how would you know what purpose they are writing for, and how to understand 19th century texts, and so etc. etc. This really helps. Before exams, I would read this. I'll read the whole thing and look at it, look at the language terms that they say, structural terms, what they say, and memorize them right off the bat. And I just constantly repeated learning them, and that helped me to people who find English language difficult. Well, trust me when I say this, read a lot of books. Well, not only fiction books, but non-fiction books as well. You know, things that interest you in non-fiction. So like, for me, might be the cosmos. I'm not necessarily a fiction person, and that's why I read a lot of non-fiction books. And that way, I learn new vocabulary, get to terms with reading, and increasing my ability to simply read a sentence and understand it fully, rather than just reading it constantly. Because when you're writing during the test, my hands usually hurt. So the last thing you want to be doing is reading one line 3-4 times over again. So that's why I recommend you reading books more, and just communicating a lot more, so you can develop on your English skills. Let's go on to the next subject. Now, our school made us buy these books because they cover the whole topic and the whole specification of DT in depth. Now, I'll say that this actually has a little more depth than is required for your GCSE. Now, I must say that this book actually has a little more content than what is required for your specification, but the more you know, the better. And so what I did was I took full advantage of this book. So sometimes you could either take this book and make notes using this, or use the book as itself and highlight major key points. And that way, when you're reading something, you don't have to look back and read the whole page. You know, if you have key points written there, you just highlight the key points so you can easily read the key points. And I did this for all the chapters that my school was doing, you know. Also, you have exercises on this at the back. So what I used to do was, whenever I had these types of questions, I would actually do them. And well, throughout these books, right, you have these questions here. And so these are also very useful to answer. Now, this is for AQA board. However, if you're doing something like Edexcel or OCR for any of these types of boards, I still think that, well, I mean, the content really is the same. So you're not going to be losing out on much. And just like with sciences, obviously read the specification because it does mention quite a lot of things. However, yeah, if you're doing OCR specification, or even Edexcel for that matter, I wouldn't suggest using the specification as much as using these books. These books actually carry a lot more weight than the specification, because these books essentially contextualize and conceptualize the things that are written very concisely in your specification. I'm predicting myself a grade 8 or grade 9 for design technology. DT is broken into theory and NEA. This is for your theory exam. A lot of stuff. It's 100 marks, the paper. which covers this thing, and you have the NEA, which is essentially you making a product, and you have to do your research, create many designs, test those designs out, and come up with a final design, and actually making that product and testing that product at the end to see whether it's viable for the market. And you have to take a lot of factors into consideration. For me, it was quite fun. However, it was also quite nerve-wracking, because at some points I was like, how am I gonna do this? However, I found ways of doing it, and my NEA was very, very bulky in that it was 52 pages long, but it got all the stuff that I needed to get onto it, and as long as it did that, it's perfectly fine. It was waffled a bit, I'm not going to lie. However, I got the job done. We also got our raw marks. I'll say that later in another video, but I predict myself to get an 8 or 9. More likely to get a 9 than an 8, but at least an 8, which is A star or A star star. On to the next subject. The second last subject we will be talking about is Spanish. With modern foreign languages, I wouldn't necessarily say to get revision guide books. However, if you do, obviously try to get these types of revision guide books. These cover a lot of stuff and have a lot of vocabulary in them. However, I would actually recommend you to use apps. Apps, for me, were much more easier to memorize and understand the language rather than books, because books you're essentially looking with your eyes. However, with certain apps, you learn it how it's spoken by the natives themselves, hearing it much more clearly, reading them, looking at them, actually being able to recall those words a lot more efficiently and effectively than any other apps, and using these books. Big one that I would actually recommend people to use is Memrise. Obviously, with any other subject, you have to use, I would advise you to actually use any specimen papers. You can search on the internet, GCSE Spanish Edexcel 91 higher paper, for example. So you get the listening paper, the reading paper, and the writing paper. And now you have something called the speaking endorsement, which is you talking to the teacher, to the moderator at least, and just speaking in and conversing in Spanish. They ask you questions, you ask them questions. You obviously have a 1-minute speech, and you're followed with a bunch of question and answers, so forth. That's why I think Memrise is also really good for you, because it helps you on your speaking, on your listening, on your reading. A piece of advice I would say in terms of modern foreign languages, more specifically on the writing papers. So you are given a constraint of 90 or 150 words. However, if you do write a little more over it, right, at most 10% over it, you're calm, you're good to go. And that's what our teachers told us. And in fact, I used that to my advantage, and I think that's how I went from a grade 4 and 5 to grade 6 and 7 really quickly, because before I didn't know that this was allowed. So actually getting to grips with the actual rules of the exam really helps you to increase your grade drastically. For this, I'm predicting myself a grade 7, a grade 6 or grade 7, which is an A or B, because I would say I'm not the best at languages. However, I think, considering my raw scores, what I got for my teacher assessed grades that we were given, I think I did remarkably well on 2 of them. However, one was a bit iffy. On to the last topic here. So history is actually a peculiar subject for me, is because I like the subject. However, I'm not necessarily good at it. It's a subject that you necessarily don't need to organize. It organizes itself somehow. With geography or with any other subject, you obviously have to find a way of actually organizing it in your brain. However, with history, it's already organized. It organizes itself, which is something that I really like about history. We, in our school, and I think in GCSE, you actually cover, well, normally you would cover 4 or even 5 topics in history. However, because of lockdown, we only did 3 of them. And so we did the Cold War, Weimar Nazi Germany, and early Elizabethan England. Just like with the DT book, I'll use the exercise book to actually make key points. And the thing I like about history itself, and I would actually recommend people taking it, you know, you can take geography, but actually history is something that makes a lot more sense, and it is very well organized. So in history, well, it seems that you will have to be like writing so much and it will hurt your hands. However, I don't think that's the case for a lot of the subjects. For example, paper 3 and paper 1, you won't necessarily need to struggle with it on terms of time constraints. For me, at least, it didn't feel like I needed to rush things. Obviously, people do it differently. However, because you already know the knowledge already, it clicks to you very naturally. Unlike with English literature, that you have to organize it yourself within your brain. Because history is so well organized already, when you're actually writing in your answers, it comes in chronologically and it helps you to actually make a better point and better piece than other subjects would allow you to. With all subjects, I reiterate it again and again and again. I'm not gonna lie, I didn't do it as much as I should have, and I think for some of them I did end up paying the price earlier on, which is that you should actually do some exam style questions. For example, these history ones, if you actually do those exam questions, you know, you're actually active recalling as well, which is always helpful to understand and get the highest grades and highest marks possible. Because at the end of the day, these GCSEs are about marks more so than actually understanding the topic. I'm predicting myself to get either grade 7 or grade 8. Looking more likely to be grade 7, which is A or A star. Well, thank you for listening. I've been filming this for about however much this is. I don't even know, do the maths, future me. And well, I hope this helped as much as it could have. And until then, well, thank you. If you would like to, you can obviously like and subscribe. And well, see you next time.